Welcome. I'm Kimberly Collins. I'm the director of the Leonard Transportation Center, and we're so happy to have you all here. We have a hybrid event for us today, as we can see. So we have part of our folks in the audience here in Omnitrans, and we want to thank Aaron and the whole crew for doing such a fabulous job for us, because back in person and this has just been fabulous and so easy. I think we have a really great program for you today. This is a question that's been ruminating in my mind for a long time, and thinking about it from a professor position. You know, I teach in public administration, so we look a lot at what's happening with government and then working with the private sector, and some of the innovations that are out there that are coming not only from the private sector, but also from government, which I think you're going to hear today. So we have a great lineup. I think, again, you're going to enjoy that quite a bit. And to get us started for a welcome, I'd like to invite the Dean of the Jack H. Brown College of Business and Public Administration, my boss, Dr. Tomas Gomez Arias. Please, Dean.
Thank you, Kim, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm between you and the actual interesting stuff. I just want to welcome you. Thank you for being here, for being part of the important conversations that communities have to have around all these. I was going to say problems. They're not necessarily problems. They're opportunities to improve our communities. But what I want to do is I want to thank the people who make this possible and the institutions who make these conversations possible. Our platinum sponsors are the San Bernardino International Airport Authority, HNTB, and the Ontario Airport. And if there are some of their representatives here, thank you for making this happen. Our gold sponsors are Woodruff, Spradlin, and Smart, and SoCalGas. And our silver sponsors are, there are a bunch of those. PPM Group, Metrolink, GLA, Foothill Transit, Cerusa, Guida, Omnitrans, TRC, SCAG, Lane, and EXP. And of course, a very, very special thank you to Omnitrans for hosting us here today, and the food and their wonderful hospitality. Thank you all. I'm looking forward to the conversation and to getting to know many of you, and to learn a lot, because that's what I'm here for. Thank you, everyone, and let's get to the real good stuff. Thank you.
And now I'd like to welcome up one of our major sponsors, but also really showing how the private sector can be a catalyst in pushing forward new ideas and really supporting the community. This program exists because of HNTB, and we are we're just very proud to work with them and be a partner with them, because they've shown so much leadership within this area. So I'd like to welcome up Matt Bushman to say a few.
Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to be a sponsor of this really from the beginning. And I'm just carrying on a legacy from the people who helped support this and get it off the ground before me. HNTB is an engineering company. We have, I lead the office right here in Ontario, and we have a number of projects throughout Riverside, San Bernardino County, and beyond. We focus only on transportation engineering. So it's roadway, freeway, rail transit, aviation, and so on. So that really is what we do. I want to thank Cal State San Bernardino, Kimberly, and the team here, Rafi and Tomas, for helping just host and organize this and get it off the ground. Aaron and Omnitrans for hosting, and really just excited to hear from the speakers today, and be able to just participate in this dialogue in person for the first time in a long time. So I'm excited for that. Thank you.
So as we call it a dialogue and not a workshop or a presentation, and we try to have give and take and thoughts, and have individuals leave with new ideas and concepts which they can apply to their own work. We have our poll questions here, and they're really just to get you thinking about what we're going to talk about today. And our first poll question is, what is the number one challenge to implementing a zero emission transportation system in the Inland Empire? right? This is the key question. It's thinking about the number one thing. What do you think is the number one thing that inhibits us from really going forward and doing in a zero emission transportation system? And so we have lack of coordination between public and private sectors. We have the energy grid and power utilities, policies, comprehensive planning, lack of financial incentives, budgetary concerns, and then other. And if you answer the other, we'd really like to hear from you because it'd be great to get some additional ideas. Our top one is financial incentives and budgetary concerns. And I think that's a big one, again, from the perspective of how does money flow into our communities, and how do we get those funds out in more of an equitable process, probably for many of the smaller areas or the communities that are not as wealthy. So really thinking about that distribution. And I think the Inland Empire, as well as the Coachella Valley, has a difficulty at times competing with their neighbors from either Orange County or LA County, where there's a lot more resources and human resources as well as other resources. And then our second piece is the lack of coordination, which is why we do these dialogues. Because again, one of the main points is to bring forward the voice of our public leaders, right? As well as many of our private sector leaders, to hear from them both and hope we can have that better coordination. All right, we'll move on to our first speaker for today. We are really pleased and honored to have our first speaker. And I was lucky enough, I was honored to go over to the city of Pasadena and see some of the work that they're doing around EV charging. And we have Marvin Moon here today to share what the city of Pasadena is doing. And I think you're all going to be really fascinated. Thank you, Marvin.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk about one of my favorite topics. Before I get started, I just want to recognize one of my colleagues here, Evan Johnson. He's our EV program manager. If you have any questions, talk to him. He's the guy that makes it happen. I'm the big cheerleader, but I'm just going to talk about something that's a little unique that not too many people are doing. Being Pasadena Water and Power is, of course, the municipal utility in the city there, and we provide all the power and water needs of our customers. But Pasadena is kind of EV central. We have the highest number of registered EVs than any other Southern California utility. In fact, we have more EVs than 21 states, not combined, but individually. So it's a lot of cars there. But charging is a big deal for these people. And I'm going to talk very briefly about why the EVs are important, a little bit about our projects we have in the queue, and then our next steps and lessons learned. Okay, I love this slide, folks. This is kind of puts it all in perspective. If you look at the different sectors that give off greenhouse gas emissions, there's agricultural, residential, commercial, the electric industry, and transportation. The electric industry is 19% of the greenhouse gas emissions in California, but the transportation is 45% when you count the refining capabilities. So there's a huge market potential for cleaning up the air. And if you look at who's making progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, almost everybody else is either flat or going up. The only sector that's going down is the electric industry since 1990, and it's going down even more and more and more. As the grid gets cleaner, the transportation fuel gets cleaner, and it helps everybody out. And that got the attention of regulators. They say, hey, if the electric industry is doing so well, why don't we electrify everything? Electrify buildings and cars and trucks and everything else. So we just have some very simple goals. The program only works if we have a lot of cars charging at the right time. I mean, if they charge at the wrong time, we got a big problem. But charging at the right time, we have so much capacity at night. And during the day, we have a lot of solar power that has to go somewhere. So it's a great opportunity for us. And we want the fuel to be competitive with petroleum. Actually, if you charge at home, it's probably 1/3 the cost. That's why everyone's buying EVs right now. In fact, I read last week that California last year had 18.8% of the new car purchases were plug-in vehicles. And then, of course, we want to make sure there's adequate infrastructure to charge. I mean, if the only charger you have is in your house, that kind of puts a ring around your house how far you can go. But you need charging out there for range extension, destination, the whole 9 yards, and actually get to further places. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about charging plazas. We have the normal programs a lot of utilities have. We incentivize cars, new and used lease purchases. We incentivize chargers for homes and businesses. But charging plazas are something that we're really big on as well. These are large installations, typically at least 20 chargers minimum. We don't use ratepayer funds for it. It's all mostly funded through carbon credits that are available from the state called low carbon fuel standards. Pays about 80% of the bill. We also use grants and things like that. But we also deliver the whole package. We have an ownership model where we put it out there. We own the chargers. We take care of them, it's the whole 9 yards. And we also like to partner with others, and I'll get into that in a minute. Next slide. Okay, so here's a thumbnail of all the chargers we have in Pasadena. And you don't have to read it, but it's 18 locations. We have a lot of little installations here and there, but 5 of these installations are 20 chargers and larger. We also have 3 charging installations under construction at this time, and of course, more planned after that. Next slide. Okay, our very first project, this was the city yards. This is where all the people come in, and where all the big police and the trash trucks and everything else is. We're buying leasing a bunch of EVs for the city. We needed a place to charge. So we built this first installation about in 2018, 2019 timeframe. It was 50 level 2 chargers and 2 DC fast chargers. The fast chargers are on the left there. We tried 2 different brands to see which company was better, which charger was better. And of course, put in a ton of chargers. We learned a lot about communications, how the chargers work together, how to do back office and things like that. Next slide. And then another project we were doing about the same time is called the Holly Garage. This is a multi-story parking structure near City Hall. Half of this installation is fleet parking for all the people that work at City Hall and building of safety and so on. The other half is public. The challenge on this one is that we didn't have any power, hardly any power. We just had a little 200 amp 480 volt service. And so we actually did this one in about 3 different versions, but we ended up at the end of the day with 52 level 2 chargers. Half of them are fleet, half are public. And you say, how can you possibly put that many chargers on that small a service? Well, we use a very sophisticated load management system. It's done by a company called PowerFlex, which started in Pasadena and Caltech. And it's so sophisticated. It can prioritize charging and so on. And amazingly, it works. So that's the solution we have when you don't have much power. Next slide. About 2019 was also when we built a first big public fast charging plaza using DC fast charging. This is the Marengo Charging Plaza. It's about a 4-story parking structure right next to the convention center, across the street from a big mall called the Paseo. It's the largest fast charging plaza in the country. And it was when we installed it, and there's been a few larger ones since then, but this is still the largest one that has all charging standards. We partnered with Tesla on this, and it has 44 DC fast chargers, 24 from Tesla and 20 from us. It was quite something working together. They were very enthusiastic to be our partner on this one. And it was kind of a shared cost thing. We both came out paying less than we would if we tried to do it ourselves. And it's been getting a lot of traffic. In fact, this one's probably gets about 12,000 sessions a month. Next slide. Here's a picture of the rooftop. Oh, go back one. The green chargers on that you see on the right there, that's our chargers. Next slide. This is another angle. You can see in that lower right corner, that's the Tesla chargers on the left, and then our chargers on the right. So it takes up quite a bit of space there. The next big plaza we did, we call it the Royal Charging Plaza. This is a parking lot that's right where the 110 freeway starts. Royal Boulevard and Glenarm. We've got our big power plant behind there. It used to be part of the power plant lot. It still is, belongs to the power plant, but it was just sitting there unused. So Tesla wanted to join us again on this project, and the deal was a little bit different on how we did it. But on Marengo, they did more of the infrastructure of the service planning infrastructure part, and this one we did more of it. But this one has 26 chargers. They have 20 Tesla chargers, and we have 6, and ours are also set up to add 12 more 150 kW chargers. What's interesting about this installation is that the chargers have got 3 times more powerful. At Marengo, Tesla had 72 kW chargers, now they're 250s, and ours were 50, and now they're 175s. So things are just getting bigger. As the batteries get bigger, we want bigger chargers that can charge the car and still keep it at a 20-minute time frame. Another view of that. We have a phase 2 plan for this to add the additional 12 chargers. And this one is getting, I guess, close to 20,000 sessions a month. Holy cow. It's like a beehive. There's lines out in the street at quitting time. So it's a very busy place. Okay, Pasadena Del Mar. This is where a light rail station comes in. It's kind of mixed use. It has commercial, residential upstairs. They have sort of an indoor train station for light rail, the Gold Line. And this had a few chargers that we put in a while back, a DC fast charger and a couple level 2 chargers. But we went through there just recently, and so now it has 3 DC fast chargers and 37 level 2 chargers. Again, this is one of those places we didn't have a whole lot of power. So all the level 2 chargers are on that 200 amp 480 volt service. Again, it works fine. Next slide. Okay, this is one that's under construction. It's called Victory Park. It's a community center. And so it has some big sports fields and people are going to be there a couple hours at a time or so. So level 2 chargers is very appropriate. So we're installing 23 level 2 chargers and 2 DC fast chargers. We have a lot of multifamily residential around the neighborhood. It's also just about 3 blocks from the freeway. So we'll get some freeway traffic on that. We're kind of stalled right now. There's kind of a nationwide shortage of switchgear. So it's actually going to take a year to get the switchgear. Everything's installed. We have the stuff sitting there and just waiting for that last piece of equipment to finish this job off. But again, it'll be another big amenity. And this is good because it's on the east side of town. Next slide. This is Robinson Park. Same thing as Victory Park. It's another community center, big sports fields. This one, we're installing 21 level 2s, 5 DC fast chargers. It's about 3 blocks from the freeway. And again, we're switchgear shortage, the same vendors doing it, installing it. This is kind of a different business model. This one, instead of us designing our part and partnering with Tesla and so on, this is one that we're doing, but we turnkeyd it to a company where they're installing it. We own everything and we're going to pay them to operate it. And we're going to pay them to do the back office and so on. So we thought that might be a good model where there's no finger pointing, it's one guy responsible for everything. But again, it's a little stalled because of the switchgear, but it's almost ready to go. Next slide. And here's another one that we're building right now. This is called Shoppers Lane. This is another project Tesla wanted to do with us. We have a big shopping center on Lake Avenue called Shoppers Lane, and they call it Shoppers Lane because there's an alley in the back and lots of big parking lot that goes for blocks that people park in. And on a city-owned lot, we're installing 8 150 kW DC fast chargers, and Tesla's installing 12 of their V3 250 kW chargers. So again, 20 chargers. Usage is going off the hook. Now, we could use the LCFS program for that, in which we do. We pay the electric bill on our side. Most of our chargers are free, but Evan's doing a great job getting our chargers. We're going to start charging money we've done it at Del Mar, and now we're doing it at Arroyo. Gradually, we're getting all of them on to a money thing. And the LCFS is a great job. It pays for the electric bill, it pays the maintenance. Even giving away the power, we make money using these carbon credits. But every time we add a plaza, the thing jumps. And as you can see, this is 4 of our installations. The yellow is the Marengo. It just ramped up. We took a little hit during COVID, but it just keeps going up. And we opened up Arroyo, and then pretty soon we'll be opening up these other 3 ones that we're building. Next slide. Okay, so next steps. Why are we building all this stuff? Obviously, we want people to use it. We want people to Pasadena is a bit of a destination. A lot of people come there for restaurants and things like that. If you don't have workplace charging, you can use it. If you don't have it in your multifamily dwelling, you can use these charging plazas for it. So it fills a lot of needs. But we also want to build programs around it. And you can't build a program unless you have something to work with. So that's the idea is we have, we're developing a low-income program. Obviously, the thing about these chargers is that people normally think about serving the people of Pasadena. Well, electric transportation is regional. There's a lot of people that come to Pasadena to work. A lot of people live in Pasadena. We have people driving through Pasadena, about 250,000 a day. So all these people have charging needs. And so that's where it can fill this thing. It's a truly regional thing. So if we do a low income program, it's not just for people who live in Pasadena, it's for anybody who uses our chargers. It's not out the door yet, but we're working on it. We also want working on the idea of a customer loyalty program. Uber and Lyft have green goals, and there's a tremendous opportunity for DC fast charging for them. I did a lot of work with Evercar and Maven when they were in business. They were leasing companies to Uber and Lyft drivers. So there's a great opportunity there. And of course, there's some vans that are delivery vans that are turning electric too, with Amazon and FedEx and so on. We also believe there's an opportunity for subscription usage. Once you get on it, maybe a 30, well, we're not quite sure, but say $30 for unlimited charging, whatever. And again, some of we're thinking down the road that we're going to have bigger needs for more charging. So that's why some of our parking spaces are bigger than normal to accommodate some of these delivery vans. Next slide. Okay, so here's some lessons learned. EV growth is going off exponentially. When we first put these chargers in, I remember the project manager who built Marengo. She said that she said a manager came in and said he wanted to put all these chargers in, and we thought he was nuts, but it turned out he was right. The bottom line is the usage is going off the hook, and we don't have time to go back and keep adding on to stuff. It's so disruptive and doing it all over again. So we try to build big. When you build big with lots of chargers, you know that you're going to have plenty of opportunity to charge. And even if you have one or two that's broken, you can use the one that's next to it. I use this example all the time. Evan's probably sick of it, but I went to Napa about a year ago, and I saw these great parking lots, 200 and 300 car parking lots, and each one of those parking lots had 2 EV chargers, 2 level 2 chargers. And I thought, what a waste. There's no chance at all of ever using them because there's too many cars ahead of me. So you got to put enough out there to make a difference. And of course, being an electric utility, we want to make a difference and provide enough service for everybody. And we also want to sell the power too. That's good. But anyway, that's why we do it big. Don't wait for grants. Those things are a flash in the pan. If you can grab it where you can. We've got those federal incentives right now. The Energy Commission puts out a lot of stuff. We've taken advantage of millions of dollars worth of grants, but the bottom line is jump on it right now. Also, partner with others. If you're going to partner with others, here's a few tips. Have all your support contracts in place and ready to go. You can't wait around. You got to be right on top of it. You got to be ahead of your partner. And then time is of the essence. So it's like a fire drill, getting it all done, and be a great partner. When you say something, stand behind what you say and deliver. Couple other comments. DC fast charging is much more complex than level 2s. You're going to get about 5 times the usage of a level 2, but the bottom line is level 2s are kind of set it and forget it. Level DC fast charging, the cars are controlling the charging, and you're mating up with 100 different kinds of cars, and it's very challenging between the manufacturer, the back office company, the payment company, getting it all coordinated and making a seamless experience for customers. Very challenging. And I think back office and monitoring and billing and cost and all that needs to get to the next level, but it's getting there. And next slide. The last thing is think big. If you're putting an installation in and you think that it's not enough, it's probably the right. If it's too big, then it's probably the right number. Yeah, just think big because it's gonna fill in. Next slide. And that completes my conclusions. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So my question was in regards to how prepared do you think the California electricity infrastructure is, in regards to like last summer, there was like flex alerts where they were asking us not to charge between 4:30 and 9.
Yeah.
How does that affect your programs in that way?
Yeah, I think at least from Pasadena's perspective, like I said, we have so much capacity most of the time. I think the grid operator, independent ISO, they ran out of power in September, and then 2 years before in August, and that's why they did that. I think that's mainly the exception. We have when I was working in Los Angeles, LA Water and Power, I've helped thousands of customers get chargers in their homes. I didn't have to upgrade a single transformer in that effort because there's so much capacity. Edison said the same thing. Pasadena's been the same thing. There's a lot of capacity. Now for some of the commercial installations, we've had to do a few things like these charging plazas. Some of these are multi-megawatt installations that I described, but amazingly, we have the power to do it. So I think we're good for the next few years, but eventually we got to, build up to do it as the percentages get higher and higher. Yes.
You mentioned that one of your charging installations was, some of it was public charging and some of it was for fleet.
Mhm.
I've talked to some folks who want to do that too. But a lot of the incentives and funding stipulate that the charging must be available to public. I'm curious if that's something you just paid for. Well, first of all, I imagine the fleet charging is not open to the public, that portion of it.
Right.
And is that something that you just paid for out of your pocket, or were you able to get some incentives and funding to fund non-public charging?
Yeah, we did get some incentives for that. What some people do, and I've seen this with our incentives that we give to our commercial customers, is that they load up the incentives on the publicly available ones, and there just happens to be enough money left over to do the other ones. Like if they pay you $6,000 per charger or whatever. There's also some companies out there like PowerFlex that are extremely cost effective. So you don't necessarily have to pay what these really high prices per charger, and you get a lot installed for very little money. We have one customer, the University Club. They installed a dozen level 2s and a DC fast charger using PowerFlex with just our incentive money. That's it. It's amazing. Sure.
Okay. And we also have a question in the chat. So let me just quickly read that. Can you explain a little bit more about the low income discount program? I think it's a great idea to promote it to a segment of the population that feels that electrifying is unattainable.
Oh, absolutely. I mentioned that the low carbon fuel standard program is one of our key funding mechanisms to pay for this stuff. We get some credits just for people owning cars in Pasadena and charging at home. So we get credits for that. We get credits for all the power that goes through our public chargers and so on. But this program has a lot of strings attached to it. And one of the strings is that a certain percentage of the revenue we get from the ones charging at home has to go towards low income and disadvantaged neighborhoods. So that's one of our key programs is take some of that money that we have to devote to low income and disadvantaged neighborhoods, and then build maybe a subscription model around it where it'll most likely be free charging, or it could be discounted charging. So the money is available, and I have to spend it in that category. So we want to get people to sign up for it. And again, like I said, it's for anybody, not just those that live in Pasadena. Anyone who uses our chargers could be part of this program if you're a low income type person and you qualify for other low income programs.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Just a question about your contracts with private companies. Since you're a public agency, you have the option to build in workforce training, hiring components into those contracts with private companies. I wonder if you've done any of that and, created a pipeline for worker training and installation, maintenance of chargers.
Right. No, we haven't for our deals with Tesla. We let them do their thing and we do our thing. We are working in that space. Evan's doing a great program with Pasadena City College for employees for maintenance development, people that want to become maintenance technicians. So that we're working on that program, helping develop that, but our contracts don't have that. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, folks.
And of course, we have more time at the very end to discuss these issues and bring them together, which is the hope. So before we have our next speaker, we have our next poll, introducing hydrogen fuel cells. So giving a little lead to our next speaker, buses and locomotives into the ZEV, so the zero emission vehicle transportation portfolio, will help to integrate this fuel choice into the system. There we go. 100% said true. So our next speaker is going to talk about some great projects that are going on here in the Inland Empire around hydrogen. And so I'd like to welcome up Victor Lopez from SBCTA. Victor.
So thanks for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Victor Lopez. I'm the Director of Transit Rail Programs for SBCTA, or the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. Next slide. So as an agency, we wear many hats. One of them specific for today is our agency is responsible for delivering some of the regional transportations for our area. And so today I'm here to talk about one of those specific projects, which is the Zero Emission Multiple Unit project, short, we call it CEMU for short. And just as you know, it was alluded to early on, essentially the project that you'll see is to develop the project was to develop, design, and actually go into operations with a zero emission train. And where we end up is actually at the introduction of a hydrogen fuel cell train. So that's what we'll see through the presentation. And so what I'll go through is I'll provide some context of how do we end up with this type of technology, right? So how do we ended up going with this type of technology? Where are we in the actual vehicle development process? And then what other projects we are actually having to undertake to be able to support this type of new vehicle technology in our industry. So next slide, please. And so some of these projects, required a lot of input for many agencies. And some of them, just the ones that we show up on the screen. As you know, for us, California State Transportation Agency was actually one of the agencies that provided some of the initial funding for us to go through the planning, design, and implementation efforts. The Federal Railroad Administration, the railroads are regulated by the Federal Railroad Administration. So they're eventually the agency that they were working with to go through the regulatory approval process to get this, first of its kind type of train in the U.S. Then we also have Stallard, which is the vehicle manufacturer. They have a plant here in Salt Lake City, based out of Switzerland. So they're the very key partner, of course, in the vehicle development. We also have Metrolink. So Metrolink is the regional commuter rail system in Southern California. They actually operate similar vehicles for the aero service here in between San Bernardino and Redlands. And they'll also be the operator and maintainer of this zero emission vehicle. Then, of course, we have the South Coast Air Quality Management District also provided some additional funding, and also we're involved in some of our funding efforts. And then, of course, some of these projects, they have a kind of an army of consultants, right? As some of our public agencies, we need a lot of expertise and resources that obviously we go out, look forward, and work with to help bring in the expertise to our decision-making process and help us make informed decisions so that we could, help undertake a project and provide good information, background, and recommendations to our key stakeholders. And some of them are just up on the screen. So next slide, please. And then again, going into this project, as part of our conversation today, early on in this project, of course, the goal was to continue the effort to decarbonize the transportation industry. Of course, rail is just a segment of that. But our effort was to, when we got the grant funding, was also to continue to decarbonize the transportation sector. And specifically for us was to select a technology that we can then implement on the existing rail infrastructure, right? I mean, there's infrastructure, throughout the U.S., and so we wanted to pick a technology that was that we could, implement it anywhere. And then specifically, when we were taking this project, we had another project in construction, which would be where we plan to operate. But we obviously wanted to pick a technology that was compatible with the project that we were, getting into construction. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, Metrolink is the regional commuter rail system. You see on the left, it's just a spaghetti of rail lines that provide service to Southern California, specifically to our area as a San Bernardino line. Currently, that line is to stop in downtown San Bernardino, just about a mile from here. We recently completed a project to extend that service to downtown Redlands. But also on the right-hand side, we also extended to introduce another service called the Aero service, which provides service using a similar rail vehicle that you'll see later on. And the reason why I pointed out is that project just went into operations last October. So we have a fully operational railroad using this type of vehicles that we build a new maintenance facility to be able to provide service. So that becomes our baseline for, introducing another new type of vehicle into an existing operating system. Next slide, please. And so when we embarked the project, as I mentioned, it was broken out into 3 different phases: our planning efforts, design and design, the design, and then the implementation phase. And so early on, what we did is we reached out to a lot of other sister agencies, Sunlight Transit, and other operators. So we went to the ports to try to, utilize some of the knowledge that's being done, embarking on some of these zero emission efforts, both on the battery, hydrogen. And so the purpose for us was to try to get some information to help us develop a set of criteria that we would then apply to different technologies that exist in the rail industry to see, what would be some of the key factors that will help us determine what kind of technology eventually you wanted to pick and go with for a train vehicle. And so some of the ones that you see just up on the screen, again, cost, of course, a big important factor, not just the initial capital cost for, whatever vehicle we're going to purchase, but also the infrastructure and ongoing operations and maintenance for those type of vehicles. What type of infrastructure, different technologies require different type of infrastructure. As it was alluded earlier on for even the EV charger, no different for hydrogen or other type of technologies. And the list goes on and on, right? How easy is it? What kind of roadmap would we have as far as the risk analysis that we'd have to go through, regulatory approvals? So again, those key factors. And next slide, please. So once we work through those, kind of key factors to evaluate this different technologies, we were comparing it against our baseline. And our baseline being is the actual rail vehicles that we have in operations today. And so when we looked at all those different technologies, we first wanted to find out which technologies would be compatible. And on the train side, there's systems that provide power externally. That's called wayside power. So what happens is very common ones is in the light rail industry. So if you go to like downtown LA or downtown San Diego, you see like the overhead catenaries, right? That is, wayside power. And so that's, we looked at those type of systems. There's another similar system that's called like a third rail. That's just another rail that provides really the power to the actual vehicle itself, not very common in our area. And then we looked at other technologies of, what if that provide the actual power stored within the vehicle. And again, that would be similar to the vehicles having like a battery storage system within the rail vehicle itself. We also looked at supercapacitors. There's the technology out there for that as well, very similar. Hydrogen fuel cells, another one. And then these other ones like, biofuel or natural gas, just so that we, could look at the different technologies available. And then there's a combination or the hybrid system they use, battery and then a battery component with hydrogen fuel cells. And so the ones that ultimately, as part of the initial criteria we carried forward were the ones that are shaded in green, which was the battery, supercapacitors, hydrogen fuel cell, and then the hydrogen fuel cell hybrid. Next slide, please. So after the initial criteria, those four were the ones that we looked at a little bit more closely. And ultimately, the supercapacitor, we ruled it out just based on the operation requirements that we needed within the corridor. It was not going to be a good technology. So that was ruled out. We also ruled out just the pure hydrogen fuel cells. What happens is we wanted to take advantage of regenerative braking. We do have this train operating all day long, stopping it at 4 stations. And then being able to recover some of that energy would help eventually the type of the capacity requirements for the vehicle. So that was ruled out. And then so the two that we ended up with after we went through the whole planning effort was really a lithium ion battery option or the hydrogen fuel cell hybrid. And when you look at the screening criteria, they all look like almost identical based on our numbering system. And they came out different for different reasons. As you can tell from the hydrogen fuel cell, there's a higher initial upfront capital cost. But then as you get into like some of the infrastructure requirements, and then specifically the schedule development, they start to deviate a little bit. So at some point in time when we after we completed the planning process, we went back to our board and said, look, we obviously kept you informed on what we're doing, the process that we've gone through. And at this point in time, we're recommending that we go with a hydrogen fuel cell. One of the primary reasons is that it'll allow us to not only operate this vehicle within the infrastructure that we have, at that time under construction, but it's something that could be deployed elsewhere, within our region or elsewhere in the state. And so ultimately, we got approval to go down the path with that type of technology. Next slide, please. And so this effort for us that has been going on for a while. The initial effort started back in 2018. That's when we first got the award from the state. formally. That's why I guess when we say we start, and then just a couple of years after that, in late 2019 is when we first signed the contract with the vehicle manufacturer to, and then undertake the conceptual design and final design of the vehicle. And the plan was to be able to, by 2022, which again was this past October, to be able to have the underlying facility, site, and infrastructure ready for this vehicle down the road. And so we met that milestone. And then our next milestone for us is that later in 2023 is when we have this vehicle scheduled to arrive in the US so that we can go into operations in 2024. You know, right now we do have a fleet of similar vehicles in operation. This would just be another vehicle as part of that fleet. Next slide, please. And so the vehicle was actually showcased in Berlin just in 2019 at an international rail conference. So it is a real vehicle, right? The renders up on the left. The vehicle has been gone through already through the manufacturing process. And then even as of 2019, we've done some initial static testing. We had a pause for this international showcase. The next slide, please. But since September, the vehicle has continued to gone through the testing process. I mean, just to give you an idea, just on the other vehicles that we commissioned, they use the conventional diesel engines that are already in operation in the US. You know, we've gone through like over a 6-month process just to test the vehicle. Obviously, with the newer type of technology, you still have to do all those tests plus some more. And so that's been happening in Europe. Specifically, again, it's a Swiss company. That's where they have their engineering headquarters, a place that they were able to troubleshoot and easily tackle any issues. So there's a video behind it. I mean, it's fully functional. It goes full speed. So the next step for us is we have to get it shipped to the US. The plan is to get it shipped sometime later this summer. I mean, just shipping alone will take about 3 months. So that we can then take it to, the plan is to take it to Denver, Colorado. There's this testing facilities in Denver, Colorado, that we want to take it for the further testing, not only for be able to meet our project goals to go through the testing program on the vehicle, but also to help and work with the Federal Railroad Administration and some of the facilities, gather some additional data on these type of vehicles. Because again, we've been working with them on the technology, the risk analysis that we have to go through again to ultimately show that that this is a safe technology that can be implemented in regular passenger rail service. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, in order to support these vehicles, you know, we have to do a couple of other infrastructure projects to be able to support them. One of them is on the facility itself. You know, the facilities that we have are, you know, in our case, we're designed to maintain diesel vehicles, right? So the ventilation system, the smoke detection system, those are not designed for hydrogen. So one of the projects is to go through and retrofit a facility, which is actually the facilities just down the street on 3rd Street. So right here by the 15, for those of you that drove in. And so we have a project to really go in and retrofit, and the retrofit process, again, mostly for hydrogen, just because the gaseous product is to upsize the ventilation system, smoke detection, the fire detection systems. And so that's the primary purpose of that project. And then, of course, we need to be able to fuel the vehicle. So we have another procurement to essentially put in the infrastructure, storage tank, and all the equipment to be able to actually fuel the vehicle. And so the facility retrofit, we've gone through the design process. We're about to put it out go through the bidding procurement process in the next couple of weeks. And our board just approved the award for the actual fueling infrastructure to Lindy Engineering. They happen to have an office here out of Ontario where we're going to get all the hydrogen supply, and then they'll be responsible for putting in the infrastructure, providing maintenance, and then delivering the fuel for testing phase, as well as initial first couple of years into operations. Next slide, please. And then again, there's just another picture of what the facility looks like. The site itself is not very big, so we do have some site constraints as far as what we can do with the facility and the site. Go next. And then again, this is, you know, just a quick picture showing what the actual vehicles that we have in operation today, and just to show that the site for the type of fleet that we want to implement, there's plenty of capacity, a couple of locations outside of the facility. And then in the facility, if you go to the next slide, there's also room for having 2 rail vehicles there full-time, going their inspection and maintenance. And if you recall, the earlier picture was they had this interesting wrap. It's the same vehicle type. Go to the next slide, please. The difference being that in the middle, this what we have is what's called the power pack. The power pack is for the vehicles that are currently in operation. They have 2 diesel engines. These vehicles are modular, so if ridership increases, you can always add more passenger cabs in the middle. And the zero emission multiple unit vehicle, the power pack is really the difference. Is that's where we have it has the hydrogen fuel cells and the hydrogen storage tanks. So if you remember from the general public, unless we have this flashy sign that says this is a hydrogen 2 vehicle, it's really, you wouldn't tell the difference. The power pack in itself is like 6 foot longer, but in the grand scheme of a train that's that long, you wouldn't notice a difference. And so that's the plan for us would be, of course, to ultimately implement those type of vehicles as we go on, right? Because right now, even though these vehicles are they have their what is called tier 4 locomotives, which is essentially the cleaner locomotives that exist today. But obviously, once we are able to successfully go through getting the implementing a zero emission vehicle, getting the regulatory approvals, it'll open the door not just for our region to continue to deploy these type of vehicles, but for everyone else in the state and in the nation. And so we're pretty, proud that we're going through this process with the FRA to, not only show that there's a viable technology that we actually can put it into revenue service and go through the regulatory approval process to allow others to utilize this technology within the U.S. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let's get to our next poll question before we go to our next speaker. And so thinking about the top requirement to moving collaboration forward between government and business regarding ZEVs will require establishing a clear unified policy framework, coordinating efforts between agencies, creating public-private partnerships, and collective investments in ZEV infrastructure. So again, looking at the top requirement, really creating public-private partnerships and the collective investments in zero emission vehicle infrastructure, 2 important pieces. And I think they go hand in hand. And then really thinking about the coordination, but also establishing a clear unified policy framework, which I think is important. And a big piece, I'll just go into a little bit, but really thinking about the future. And as many of you work in your agencies, even though it got the least amount of votes, but that 7%, thinking about the coordination between agencies is really important from my perspective, and even coordinating in your agencies, right? So making sure that HR is talking to the planning and is talking to budgeting, and that there is this coordinated effort and getting out of our silos. As one who comes from academia, I know a lot about silos. PhDs are trained to only work in their own little field, but really thinking, how do we work across places, so I'm going to give that one a plug, even though it got the least amount of votes. All right, so thank you. Our next speaker is joining us from the East Coast. We're very happy to have him here. Andrew Conley. And Andrew, I think you're in Boston, aren't you?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. So Andrew will be joining us from Boston.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me, and thanks to the previous presenters. I think from the previous presenters, we heard great level of detail of on the ground planning needs for zero emission vehicles, both electric and hydrogen options. I'm going to take us up kind of to the 30,000 foot view of what regions need to be looking at to plan for the deployment of both of these types of zero emission vehicle technologies. So we can jump to the slides and keep going to the next one. So in terms of HNTV, as Matt said at the outset, we are a national engineering firm. We're working in all 50 states on a range of transportation projects, but this highlights some of our most recent zero emission vehicle projects across the country. So we're working in 4 key areas with state departments of transportation developing zero emission vehicle plans. I'll talk more about those in a moment. With cities and regions, counties, MPOs, and others. Also advancing airport zero emission vehicle plans, a lot of those on the West Coast. You can see California and Washington State, and then supporting transit ZEV transitions. So our work most recently focuses in those 4 areas, and some of the examples I'm going to give are meant to highlight this overarching framework. Next slide. So obviously there's record funding from the federal level now through things like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, funding zero emission vehicles. If we jump to the next slide, while there's, California has long been a leader with low carbon fuel standard and other local and regional incentives, those 2 funding programs from the federal side, right now HNTB is tracking 78 different programs across those bills, a lot through USDOT with FTA, FRA, FHWA, funding these types of deployments across different agencies. So this record funding can be matched with state and regional funding to help spur deployments. So if we jump to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight one of the programs. This had applications due late last year, but it's a $9.5 billion initiative in investing in clean hydrogen initiatives, or hydrogen hubs that they're calling it. One of the reasons I wanted to just pull this one out is it really emphasizes some of the key elements of challenges and opportunities around building out hydrogen infrastructure. So hydrogen's really a focus for the heaviest duty vehicles that need to move long distances and don't have either the amount of battery capacity available or the time to recharge. So think things like shipping, like trains, like we just heard about, long distance trucking, and transit buses. These are kind of the core areas that we see hydrogen really solving for, that energy density, getting vehicles the amount of range they need and the time on task for refueling to really perform their services. But the key challenges with hydrogen are making sure you have clean hydrogen production. So we just heard about some of the sources regionally for that train project for clean hydrogen production. But it's important that the source of the hydrogen be clean, and also the distribution, and number 2 here, be clean. So, there are projects where, you could have clean hydrogen being delivered on diesel tanker trucks. That's what we're trying to avoid here. And so where the Department of Energy is funding these hubs so that you can have clean production, clean processing and delivery, and clean end use. The end use is the easiest part beyond, the issues we just heard on the transit side, making sure you have the operations and the maintenance facilities to sustain it. So if we dive into that a little further on the next slide, really when it comes to hydrogen, it's about building these regional ecosystems for that clean production, clean processing and delivery, so that the end use, the actual zero emissions, can be a true zero emission vehicle. So just like that hubs project, a lot of regions around the country looking at building out hydrogen are focusing on mapping their regional supply chain so they can ensure they have clean production, delivery, and use of the fuel, and making sure that they have shovel-ready projects, because in many cases, this infrastructure is not fully there. We have electric transmission lines, natural gas transmission lines, but we don't yet have a national network of hydrogen distribution. So that's one of the key challenges that need to be built out, and making sure the region coordinates around how to get from that clean production through the clean distribution is really the focus of this slide, and establishing those shovel-ready projects so folks can grab those grants when they become available. So I can talk more to this in the Q&A, but we'll jump to the next slide to keep it at the 30,000 foot view. When it comes to those federal funding programs, there's a lot of those 78 programs that also fund electric vehicles and infrastructure. But the marquee program is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, $7.5 billion investment from the federal level, with $5 billion in formula funding for states and $2.5 billion in discretionary or competitive grants. California, of course, is getting one of the biggest totals in the formula funding, given the population and road miles in the state, at $383 million. It's really to build out long distance fast charging. So, we heard the great work that the utilities are doing locally to build some of that regional and inner city fast charging, but and even destination charging. But this is really for that distance travel nationally. So if we jump to the next slide, for both hydrogen and electric, you have slightly different goals, because most of the hydrogen, while it can fund some passenger vehicles, the market is really trending towards passenger vehicles being electric, and some of those heavier duty freight vehicles, transit vehicles, trains and ships and trucks being hydrogen. So there's different use cases and different key stakeholders for each. But broadly speaking, what we're seeing most regions undergo is some variation on these 6 activities, really looking at the existing conditions, where are vehicles traveling, what are the passenger vehicle and freight corridors in the region, what are the key stakeholders, both the technical partners like utilities and others, planning partners like MPOs, and public partners like the actual motorists and residents of the areas where some of this refueling infrastructure will need to go, understanding their needs and their perspectives, so that you have the existing conditions and the needs of the region mapped, and then responding to those needs with the regional vision, implementation strategy, and plan. So we're seeing a lot of this happen right now, where states are trying to coordinate. Many states outside of California are really taking a first look at this in terms of electric vehicles through that NEVI program, and then coordinating with MPOs, counties, cities, airports, transits, and other partners to get that true regional vision that puzzles together and complements the statewide vision. So it's important to coordinate, as many of our poll questions have highlighted. If we jump to the next slide, we saw this same framework. This is actually from a NREL study. This pyramid is proportional, and it's really focused on the use cases for charging for passenger vehicles, with the bulk of charging being at home. I've heard folks describe the majority of motorist trips are from your front door back to your front door at the end of the day. So you're not going a terribly long distance. You're either doing things for recreation or shopping or appointments, or you're going to your workplace. So home and workplace are the key areas that have the highest levels by quantity of charging, and they're less time sensitive. So they can really allow for those lower power level 2 chargers in many cases, because you have a longer dwell time. But what NEVI is really focused on funding is this tip of the pyramid, the fast charging, particularly for long distance travel. And similarly with a lot of the hydrogen work, you're either looking at a fleet solving for its own use case, as in what we just heard from the transit and the rail side, or you're looking at solving for these high use freight corridors regionally. So this is just a way to think about use cases in planning ZEV. And when we jump to the next slide, it's important. You can't have hydrogen powered bikes, obviously, but especially with the battery electric side, you can really take a multimodal approach, look at how you're going to integrate battery electric beyond passenger vehicles into some of the scooters and bikes, in terms of those kind of first mile, last mile use cases, as well as the wider transit and other use cases for folks who may not be individual motorists. So it's important to also factor in that multimodal approach to planning, and we're seeing a growing number of market solutions and strategies to do that. So jumping to the next slide, really what we're seeing a lot of the regions do, you don't have to focus on the eye chart below, but really a lot of regions are looking at where do the trips originate, where are they going, what's the best location for the infrastructure, and this chart is for charging, what is needed in terms of charging. And we really heard from the utility side, what we're seeing nationally, that once it's built, it is utilized and quickly heavily utilized. So how much charging is needed based on that volume, what type. NEVI's requiring 150 kilowatt chargers, but many states are looking at and regions are looking at future proofing and exceeding that level of charging, putting in more ports and higher kilowatts. And really, developing a plan for the region that prioritizes the key places, particularly if it's from the public side, the key places that the private sector and the market aren't going to solve for. So a lot of these federal programs have an equity focus through the Justice 40 initiative that we're going to talk about more in a slide coming up. So jumping to the next slide. One of the things HNTB is working on with a lot of our clients are interactive maps focused on that public engagement. It's really important you put these where people are going to use the infrastructure, whether it's fleets on the hydrogen side or motorists on the electric vehicle side. It's important that you get the placement right. And a lot of what we've been doing, this is an example of what we did for Ohio, but we're doing with other states, is creating interactive maps for the public to comment on, as well as for the utilities to provide feedback to the main planners about power availability and feasibility of some of those key sites. So coordinating these with stakeholders, as some of the survey questions have highlighted, is a key challenge as well as opportunity in this space. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see some of those key stakeholders, particularly when it comes to the Justice 40 initiative. It's requiring that the investments of these federal funds show that 40% of the benefits go to historically disadvantaged communities. And so to ensure that those benefits go to the right places, as well as that these projects come off seamlessly in a way that really benefits the public, a lot of coordination is needed between transit and environmental groups, state and local government agencies, equity-based residents and community-based organizations, the general public who will be using them, and of course the private sector who will supply a lot of the solutions or the final products. So through interactive mapping, where a lot of these stakeholder groups can provide input and data into the process, as well as the next slide, what HNTB is really working on, if we jump to the next slide, with a lot of our work is showing that this equity-based engagement has really taken place. So this is actually an example of the dashboard from the Link 21 project in the Bay Area, which is really focused on extending BART and other Bay Area transit services to the wider region there, with a heavy focus on making sure equity populations are included in the public involvement and the planning of the process. So HNTB is really focused right now on working with many of our clients to ensure both that this kind of engagement and feedback has taken place, that it's analyzed for use in the planning, as well as reported on for the public. So the public has confidence that these have been planned with a wide variety of stakeholders. Jumping to the next slide. Another key part of this with public sector planning is planning those procurement processes. Most of these, whether it's a local city, a county, an MPO, a state, they're going out to RFP or other kind of procurement to actually get these things designed, built, and operational. And so there's a lot of considerations here, including design guidelines, how you're going to determine best value, how you're going to make sure that these are sustainable and operated and maintained for the long term. And we're really assisting a lot of our clients in thinking through some of these complex decisions, whether it's NEVI or a regional deployment. For example, we're working with the city of Chicago on this right now. A lot of these are new things. California has certainly been a leader in many of these deployments with electric vehicles. And a lot of this is newer for people outside of California, and they're going to stand up these programs for the first time. So as we jump to the next slide, the key elements of this is really the coordination elements. So there's not just planning, the coordination side, there's a lot of coordination that's involved in the actual installation, operation, and maintenance. So with that said, I'm not going to go into detail here, but just suffice it to say, coordinate these players throughout the planning phase as well as the deployment phases often is a key to success. And so I'm going to round this out with just a couple of quick nods to some key projects. What we're really focused on, as I mentioned at the outset, is working with a variety of partners from fleets to local partners, regional partners, and states on a variety of this work. And it's really yielding a lot of the best practices that I've talked about. So I'm going to highlight 3 projects in closing. One is on the next slide here is the Smart Columbus project. So this was in Columbus, Ohio, where there was no incentives or mandates or funding to speak of for vehicle electrification. And this was focused on vehicle electrification in a 7-county region, and really resulted in a huge spike in catalysts for adoption there, with fleet purchases, that multimodal planning, consumer purchases, charging ports being installed, and really the focus was decarbonization and a huge reduction in greenhouse gases. So, this can be done regionally as well as locally and statewide. On the next project, we're working with Houston Metro Transit. We created a short-term battery electric bus transition plan. You can see they have diesel buses, they have some CNG buses, and they're planning to move right now. They have their first 40 battery electric buses in play. We're working with them to update this, where a lot of that bottom right-hand portion of the graphic here is going to become hydrogen, because particularly for those longer range routes throughout the greater Metro Houston region, they need something with more energy density that can solve for the distance, that wouldn't have time to charge as long as you would need for that size of battery. And then last but not least, we've been working with San Francisco Airport on a zero emission vehicle master plan. You can read the details online, but it highlights some of the comprehensive planning work for some of these local partners. So with that, I'll just end with that it takes a whole team, both locally and at HNTB. So on the next slide, I just highlight some of the HNTB team members that are working on these zero emission plans. But that concludes this kind of 30,000 foot overview of both hydrogen and EV planning, and happy to discuss more with you all throughout the rest of the session.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks for joining us. Are there any questions for Andrew at this time, or from the Zoom room or from our room here at Omnitrans? Okay, before we get to our final speaker, I'd like to have our last poll question. When do you think California will achieve transportation carbon neutrality? Oof, who knows? 2030, 2040, when the state's trying to put it forward? 2045, 2050, or greater than 2050? All right, we're looking at 2045 or more than 2050. So we'll see what happens. I think things are speeding up quickly as the marketplace comes around. So seeing some changes. Our next speaker is going to give us a little hint on how we're thinking about things regionally and giving that, which I think is very important, that local government perspective. Things happen locally, as we say, all politics are local, right? But it's where, it's my personal bias, but I think really it's where things are going to move it forward is at our local government. So we're lucky to have Jan Harnick here today to not only represent the city of Palm Desert, but also the president of SCAG to talk about a regional perspective. So Jan, please.
Well, thank you. And I come to you with perspective from the city, Palm Desert, which is in the Coachella Valley. And I got to SCAG because I represent Palm Desert at Riverside County Transportation Commission. And then I was appointed to SCAG. So I have those 3 kind of different perspectives. And you'll hear it throughout while my presentation today. And can I have okay, there we go. And can we go to the next slide? So here's what I want you to take a look at. SCAG is a huge region. It's bigger than many of our states. 37,000 square miles. It is 6 counties. More than 19 million, well, it says 18.7 million people. So one of the things that SCAG is great about is its richness in resources, the diversity in thinking, and geography and perspective. So imagine I'm coming from an area that includes the Salton Sea and now the thought of lithium mining. And then we have people representing Los Angeles. So you can imagine the different discussions we have. And I want to thank the Leonard Transportation for bringing everybody together, for convening the different facets of the transportation world, because you'll see, if I were to summarize my presentation today, we're going to get to the best conclusions when we include everybody. The broader lens we use, the more inclusive we are, we get to better results. So we have a lot of programs to meet the environmental mandates that we are, what we saw in our last slide, what we are tasked with. And we do our best to meet the environmental, economic, and equity goals through really comprehensive planning, which was, by the way, that's what I voted for in the first one, comprehensive planning. We need to include everyone. So we can go to the next slide. We talk about the last poll we had, the air quality and those challenges that we have. So of course, we're going to continue to lead. SCAG is, and those of you who may not know, SCAG is a planning organization. That's what we do, is we plan for the future for all of these areas, but we do it in coordination with federal and state mandates. How do we meet the goals of those mandates? And if we don't meet them, then there are punitive damages for us. I have a little note that I wrote, Federal Clean Air Act. If we don't meet that, that means federal sanctions that may be imposed, jeopardizing transportation funds. So it's really important that we help meet those. We have some of the worst air quality in the nation. Now, I'm from Southern California. I'm from Pacoima, and I remember as a kid, we had smog days. We weren't allowed to go outside and play. Now, we've come a long way from there. Those smog days don't happen anymore. So we can do it. But still today, we have some of the worst air quality. And as you can see in the slides, 9% of children under 17 have asthma. It's just unacceptable. So there's a really strong public health component to this issue. And we need to look at that. Transportation is a significant source of both criteria and greenhouse gas pollutants. So AQMD, thank you, Todd, shows that in 2018, transportation sources are responsible for roughly 85% of the NOx emissions and 29% of the PM 2.5 emissions in the South Coast Air Basin. And statewide, mobile sources are responsible for 41% of GHG. So can we go to the next one? So the state has tasked us with some ambitious requirements to achieve the zero emission transportation system. And it's important. This graphic from the slide, and this is a lot that Mr. Connolly spoke about, the NEVI program. And I want to mention, we're happy with how we see things progressing. But one of the things we really need to work on are the trucks. I sit here and I'm watching trucks go back and forth. Our goods movement is almost a separate issue than people movement. And we have to address them both with just as much passion and direction as we possibly can. And we also have to, and this is again where the letter transportation, where center comes in. As this evolves, as we address these issues, we also afford the opportunities for new careers. And as long as our education is relevant to this issue, we are going to go and we're going to do great things. And you've talked about it. Everyone's talked about it. We do have to make sure that we have the workforce who's able to address this. We can go to the next slide, please. So existing conditions. Now, we did talk, and you've heard this a couple times, zero emission sales in 2022 were 18.38% of total light duty sales. Sounds great. That's 2.8% of the fleet. We're a long way off. And we have to take a look at what that means. And one thing we don't want to do with policy, and we tend to do it, is we don't want to squash innovation. We don't want it to be that electric is the only answer. And I'll address that in some of the policies and the legislative platforms that SCAG is taking later on. But imagine that by 2022, it requires the Clean Cars Act that in August 2022 requires that by 2035, 100% of the new passenger car sales to be zero emission. That would result in roughly 8 million EVs. Now think about this. Now I know you're working hard on this, but nonetheless, we have fewer than 35,000 chargers and they're not standardized. So we do have that issue that we must deal with. So our region will need well more than an additional 500,000 chargers by 2035. So when we talk about the medium and heavy duty vehicles, there are a total of 1,943 zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles in our state. That's it. So we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of work to do. We're very proud in the Coachella Valley, and it was referenced before, thank you, Sunline was the first hydrogen fuel cell bus system in the country. And we use hydrogen fuel cell. And part of the reason too is because of the heat that we have, electricity and batteries are challenged. That's very difficult in the Coachella Valley. But we're very proud of what they're doing. They are using solar. They are generating the hydrogen needed for this fleet. And it's successful, and it certainly is a model that other people are learning from. So we can go to the next slide, please. So we're tackling a range of regional challenges, and our Connect SoCal, which is we are tasked, we being SCAG, we are tasked with a regional plan. One is the RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, and then the Sustainable Communities strategy. And we must do that every 4 years. So right now we're working on the one that will roll out in or be adopted in 2024. And we have to work across our entire region. It's huge, and it is a challenge. But again, because we bring so many diverse voices to the room, we are able to really come up with solutions that address the issues. We have the Clean Transportation Technology Vision, and I'm going to read about this. This was established to create a holistic and coordinated approach to decarbonizing passenger vehicles, transit, and good movement vehicles. The vision is for zero emission transportation wherever possible, with the use of cleaner mobility options where it's not feasible to have the zero emission. And so we believe that the zero emission vehicles are just a piece of the transportation solution. We can go to the next. Okay, so that was one of those slides. And do we do right or left? I guess that's the right side. That was me this morning. So zero emission vehicles, without a doubt, improve air quality. But when we look at policy, this is one of the issues with this policy. It blurs lines sometimes. Sometimes it's like, okay, well, if I have an electric car, I've solved the problem. Well, I sat and I've kind of parked on the 10 because I came in early this morning. I drive a hybrid. The car next to me was a hybrid. The car in front of me was electric, and I was stopped. So it's a piece of the solution. And we have to be careful that when we communicate, when we message regarding these policies, that we make sure that people understand that just because we shift to electric doesn't solve the problem. We don't want to have to build another lane for more electric vehicles. What we want to do is look at this as holistically as possible and figure out, how is it that we can encourage public transportation? How we don't have to, I mean, is there much worse use of land than freeways? I mean, think about it. And what we see, and I love this slide because it shows you in those last 3 slides with whether you are regular combustion, it's autonomous, electric car, takes up the same space. And we're just going to be more people who will need more cars. And this was interesting. Recently, I read that in the US, there are, I think it's for every 80 people, for every 100 people, there are 80 cars. In the rest of the world, it's like if for 8 people or 100 people, there are 8 cars. Think about that. So we need to shift our thinking as well. And I went to LAX the other day for a tour because they have the Olympics are coming in 2028. We want to have a great transportation system there. And it's amazing the work they're doing. People Mover, and they have this huge concrete building that they are building right now. It will be the 2nd largest concrete building in the United States. You know what the first largest is? And I'll bet most of you could guess on your first or second guess, and that would be the Pentagon. 2nd largest concrete building in the United States. And you know what it's there for? Cars, to put rental cars in it. Now, does it matter if they're electric or if they're combustion engine? We use that space. That's a land use issue. And that's one of the things that SCAG deals with. We all want clean air. Each of us does. We also want less congestion. So go to my next slide, please. So how much do we want to play government whack-a-mole? And this is part of us looking out as far as we can and as inclusive as we have. And certainly our policymakers, they don't have crystal balls, and they're not scientists, and they're not engineers. They are people who care about their community. But occasionally what we miss are the problems. You know, we've all heard the unintended consequences. So we really have to look at this in as large as an inclusive frame as we can, so that we can avoid the problem, so we don't have to play whack-a-mole. One size does not fit all. And we learn that, and we can look back in history and see that. And if we can talk to our public, if we can engage our community more and more, and I love that that's what Mr. Conley was talking about, we come up with the best solutions. And messaging and education always have to be part of the policy. We can't have a policy that we don't explain, that we don't include the people on. So we truly have to understand what our goal is so we can shift our thinking and behavior. Next slide, please. So part of our solutions, these, I think we all know, and from here, I'm going to go into LA. I have a meeting tomorrow. I drove here because we're trying to get a train to Coachella Valley, and we're going to keep trying. but I don't have a train, so I had to take my car. But I'm going to go to the train station and I'm going to take a train into LA because that's a personal decision, but I understand the importance of it, so I'll do it. And what we have to do is make sure everyone understands the importance of public transportation. So we talk about mobility choice, incentives, technology, and each speaker has talked about that. Center on people and travel needs. We have to think less, I think, on building for cars. Let's build for people. We need to leverage our new tools, partnerships, deeper community engagement. We have to get to all of our communities. And I look at in the Coachella Valley, we're such a great illustration of the diversity of a community because we have Palm Springs, which everybody thinks is a playground. And then we have near the Salton Sea, which is abject poverty where people don't have water to drink. So if we can get to all these people and make sure that they have their needs in transportation, we are moving ahead. So the other answer too is broadband, and we all have the same issues with broadband. And, you know, we talked about the help we can give to people who can't afford it. There is ACP, Affordable Connectivity Program, and I hope everybody's community is now using it because it's a great asset to our people. But at the same time, we have to make sure that they have the connectivity, both wired and wireless, so that they can use it, whether it's education, it's employment, it's medical, it's another way to get people off the road, and it's important. And we certainly saw that in COVID. It was already there. It was highlighted by COVID. So we can go to the next one. And again, we need to think about, I love that you have, San Bernardino has a train that goes to Redlands. This is important. We want to get the close, create those 15-minute communities we talk about. So if we can look at our land use more strategically, more in a bigger inclusive way, we can have people who can walk to the grocery store and walk to their work and walk to whether it's their doctor, their education. The local jurisdictions are in process of building. We're looking at more than 1 million homes in California. How do we help them do that? And if we build them intelligently, the TODs, the transit-oriented developments, then we get people off the road and we create better lifestyles, better quality of living, and better air quality. So we're working hard with that. And again, these are public-private partnerships. And the more that we can engage the public, communicate what our effort is, the better off we're going to do. Let's go to the next slide. Encourage continuous innovation in clean technology. What we don't want to do is to say, okay, the source of energy, when we came across gasoline, we thought that was it. Well, we don't want to squash innovation. We want to make sure that we're still thinking, that we still are looking for something. Hydrogen fuel cells, great. Electricity is great. Maybe the next one we don't even know about. So we don't, whatever we do, we don't want to squash that. And I mentioned earlier, where SCAG is committed to remaining technology neutral and pending board approval. So at our next meeting, I think, we have defined this as, quote, a stance that does not give preference to a particular technology as long as it furthers the desired outcome of a zero emission transportation system that meets or exceeds federal and state targets. Solving one problem should not create a new environment or social impact. We don't want to play government whack-a-mole. So we need more research and development. And one of the things in that little round picture, what that shows you is old EV batteries being used to store solar. So they took old car batteries, they have found a way to design retention to store the power from those solar panels. So that's the sort of thing we have to keep looking for new ways to go. Let's not just put all our eggs in one basket. Next slide, please. Okay, consensus building and support for the cities. And we know collaboration is absolutely critical, and no city can do it alone. And as much as you hear a lot about local control, what we want is local decision making, but we also know that we are always better together. There are certainly transportation is one of those things where when we work together, we're going to come up with the best solution. There's no question about that. When we'll provide SCAGWIL letters of support for funding for clean tech related studies and plan, and we have sustainability grants also. So please get in touch with SCAG. SCAG is a great resource. We have research and data support. We have grant partnerships. Our Toolbox Tuesday webinars will tell you a lot of ways that you can help your community and your agency. We offer a lot of trainings and tools. So let's go to the next slide. So upcoming, the RTPSCS, which we call Connect SoCal. We're going to be engaging the region. Please, I hope you can get your agencies, your students to speak up, and so that we hear their voice, so we come up with the best product, our best Connect SoCal. It will help reinforce the vision for zero emissions. And one of the greatest things that SCAG does is accumulates and shares information. We have an amazing data platform. We just got an award from Esri for the data platform that we have. So please use that. It will really help you in your results as you move forward. So let's see what else. We're creating a medium and heavy duty zero emissions roadmap to further a zero emission goods movement system. The goods movement system is a huge issue, and we know it in areas like this. It's right in front of us, going through the Coachella Valley. We have to address that. And it is critical for our health, and also the supply chain issue, which you mentioned. We have to make sure we're working on that, to make sure that we have the clean technology to provide for the future. Next slide. Oh, I knew there we go. Remember Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Came out in 1988. It was set in 1947. The reason I have that there is because I remember it so well. But you know what it was really about? It was really about doing away with the public transportation in Los Angeles. Go back and watch it. I hope this provides the impetus to go download this and watch it. Because what it was about, remember Judge Doom, the very evil man, and we find later is a tune himself. He, through his company, Cloverleaf, think about it, buys up public transportation in Los Angeles. And then he wants to buy Toontown so he can destroy it and build freeways. And he can retire as a judge from being a judge, and he will retire on the proceeds from everything that freeways require. And in it, there's a PI, his name is Eddie Valiant. He's this hard drinking guy. And in the beginning of it, he jumps on the back of a streetcar, and the kids look at him and they go, "Hey, mister, you don't have a car?" And he says, "Who needs a car in LA? We have the best public transportation in the world." So when we develop policy, it's critical that we do so in an inclusive fashion. And we look forward as well as possible. But we have to educate the end users. And I'm going to brag a little bit. I have a 37-year-old daughter who's never owned a car. Her goal is to never own a car. And she understands, because she's heard it enough, how important it is that we choose different ways to get around. And I want to mention this, it struck me the other day, when we talk about environmental issues, the example to explain and quantify results is this. Through this action, it will be equivalent to taking X number of cars off the road. And we do that because we want to try and help people understand what we're doing. But you know what does that? You know what takes X number of cars off the road? Taking X number of cars off the road. That's what does that. And we'll get there if we can help people understand the importance of this and help them shift their thinking and their personal decisions. Each of us makes decisions every day that really change the future. So apology education, messaging, and understanding leads to better decisions and better quality of living for everyone. So that's what I got. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is just kind of open up the floor and maybe get some initial reactions on how do we bring this all together for everything that we've heard from all of our speakers, and maybe if our other speakers also have any reactions to what they heard.
Good morning, everyone. Vanessa Thomas, San Bernardino Valley College. I actually have a question for all of the presenters today. So at our college, we teach students how to maintain electric vehicles for the commercial vehicles, the commercial sized vehicles, heavy and medium duty trucks. We teach them how to maintain electric vehicles, natural gas vehicles, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We've been trying to get into installing and maintaining charging stations. However, we've run into the barrier of the equipment being proprietary. Therefore, we can't get that information. Could you help us try to get that information so that we can train people for that industry?
Great question.
As Marvin Moon, just two suggestions. The Clean Tech Incubator in Los Angeles has a company that is developing charging maintenance as a model, and they train techs on how to do it. Obviously they have the same problem because the different systems require different things, but that's one avenue to explore. I don't remember their name. Do you remember, Evan? Charging Help. Okay, there you go. The second thing is to get in with people that own and operate infrastructure like Pasadena that would need charging back office maintenance support. And that is one of the biggest areas that needs development, is keeping those things running because for customer service concerns. So anyway, that's my two suggestions.
I think for me, I mean, you're right. The whole technology that goes into that power pack, I mean, this is all proprietary. What we would recommend is, the type of applications it's already out there, even on the bus side. And so what we seen, again, I defer back to Sunline Transit. They actually have I believe it's called like the Center for Innovation, where they provide workforce development and training. I'm pretty sure they can share a lot of the material on that particular use of the technology and how to maintain it.
Andrew, do you have any comments or?
Yeah, a couple quick things to add. Certainly there's the standard pipelines of electrician training programs through apprenticeship programs like the IBEW programs. Definitely make sure you're connecting with them. The NEVI formula funding program requires certified technicians, electricians, to also have the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, EVITP certification. You can only get that if you're a licensed or certified electrician, but the EVITP program is working on a whole range of training resources to train folks all along the pipeline of apprenticeship programs and even pre-apprentice programs, vocational trainings. So I can connect you with the national chair of that program, Jennifer Medford. She's been working with a lot of the states on how to do exactly what you're doing, because certainly the charging stations or the final electrical contractors, like if it's ChargePoint or EVgo or something, they're going to say, we want you, electrical contractor, to have given your staff particular training on our proprietary system before we allow you to install it. But there's a lot of best practices throughout the chain that folks like Jennifer at EVITP can connect you with resources to prepare for that, plug in at the right place and prepare the trainings that are needed at that time, a lot of the final trainings are required by the electrical contractor organizations themselves.
Howdy, Todd Warden at the South Coast AQMD. I've been your AQMD field rep for 15 odd years. I also go over to ARCOG occasionally, and sometimes I go out to CVAG. And I will say that about 14 years ago, early in the morning out the Coachella Chamber, some lady came in to the meeting. She wanted to get involved and she was interested. She said, I want to know who was here and why were they here? And I introduced her to some of the chamber folk and then the utility, the gas company out there, Sunline. And today she's our president. And it's awesome to see her here talking on these subjects, but it's also reminds me that the residents, it's one thing to have a president, but it's the residents. We have gadflies that come to our meetings and we have people that are interested, involved, they have no idea what we're doing. And thank you to Dr. Collins and the Cal State for putting this on and getting everybody in the room. And it's beautiful, but residents have no idea what we're doing. They have no idea about the things that, I almost said Sandbag, SBCTA is doing rock star things at the transportation and clean air, and nobody knows. And it's on us to do that. And it's one of the things that I do for the Air District, but well, this is an amazing circle of folks, and stick a sticker on that bus, stick a QR code on that bus, tell the kids at the campus what they're doing here and right down the street at Valley College and over there in Colton. Colton's on right now. They're doing great community outreach to a little tiny community that could really benefit from the clean air technology that's coming out. And I will say that I worked for a shorter US Senator, also now a Coachella resident, and she wanted a stop sign. And they wouldn't get a stop sign. That got her to be our US Senator boxer. So those people that we don't necessarily reach out and touch can essentially be the president someday.
We do have one question. We only have 4 minutes, but we have one question that's a big question. So maybe I'll ask it and then maybe we can get the contact information and share it. But thinking about lithium extraction that's going to be happening out in the Salton Sea and some of the environmental planning that's going to have to go around that, because it's needed, but it can be a very difficult industry depending on how it's done. Any just quick comments on that?
It's hard to have a quick comment about it because it's really a difficult issue. And when we look at the metals needed for the batteries, whether it's a cobalt and it's nickel and it's lithium, nothing is easy about this. And we know what a difficult process mining is. I did go out recently and looked at the process they're using to get the lithium out of the ground. And they certainly have worked hard using the thermal water and technology that we have out at the Salton Sea, but it's got a long way to go. And we have to understand the land is going to be significantly disturbed by this process. So is this the best way? So we have so many decisions. Again, let's not play whack-a-mole later. Let's really look this out, vet it out. How do we dispose of those batteries? Besides making them, let's look at the full life cycle of the batteries and how much of those products needed to make those batteries do we have in the United States? And where can we, in fact, even when it exists, can we mine for it? So there's a lot of issues here.
Yeah, it's big. And I think it goes along with that idea of which Mr. Moon brought for us. It's much easier if you build out your infrastructure first and plan. And again, Evan Johnson, who works with Marvin, really showed that they've put in a lot of capacity in a lot of their sites to expect what's going to happen in the future. Because of anyone who studied any kind of urban planning or development or international development and such, when you bring in a community or you have a bunch of houses and then you have to put in the water and the sewer afterwards, man, it's really expensive. So it's better to think ahead, do that planning, Some of my main takeaways, writing a paper on this as well. So thank you all for giving me little, data from my paper. But, building trust, working across our silos, really thinking about what the future looks like, and creating that vision for the Southern California region and how the Inland Empire is going to be part of that. Because I'm sure you all saw in the newspaper a couple of days ago, they're planning on us growing by 25% or something. We're going to be the main region in Southern California growing compared to other regions. So it's critical we really think about what that future looks like. I would like to, my final comment in my last minute is to say, I hope you'll join us in April 18th. We're going to be talking about back in the office. What does it really look like telecommuting in today's world? So I hope you'll come. We have an economist coming from UCI and some others who will be talking about looking at the numbers and thinking about what telecommuting will mean for our region, which goes back to Councilwoman Harnick's bit. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to Omnitrans. Thank you to the LTC staff, particularly Rafi and Gabe, for the support, and all of the Omnitrans folks who really helped put this together. And we hope to see you April 18th. Thanks so much.